Hello there and welcome back to my channel, or if this is the first video of mine you are seeing, then welcome. I will be wrapping up the end of the year with this video where I will be talking about my top 10 eyeshadow palettes that I tried thus far. Now, some of the palettes that I'm mentioning here weren't necessarily released this year, but I tried them this year, so I'm just including all the palettes that I tried. Now, I did try some really nice palettes throughout the year, and I was originally planning on doing a ranking video, but honestly, I really don't know how people can do those because I struggle so much with ranking things, because I think all of these palettes I'm going to mention in today's video are worth it. They're amazing. I would recommend them to anyone who is looking to buy a new eyeshadow palette. But looking back on all the videos I did this year, these 10 palettes to me really stand out the most, and I feel like they deserve to have more of a highlighted spot than just some palettes that maybe I like but didn't actually truly love. So I have 5 neutral palettes I want to talk about, as well as 5 colorful palettes. I will have timestamps listed for you below in case you want to skip around and just watch the neutrals or just watch the colorful palettes, whichever maybe you prefer. But if all of that sounds interesting, let's go ahead and get started. I'm first going to start out with the neutral palettes. We all know I love neutral eyeshadow. That's definitely my vibe when I go for eyeshadow, but I do like color as well sometimes too. And I feel like I did branch out a little bit towards more colorful palettes right there at the end of the year when I started trying more indie brands. But we're going to start with the neutrals, and these are in no particular order. I just have them arranged by size, whether that be the amount of eyeshadows or the actual size of the palette. So the first one I want to talk about is, of course, the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes eyeshadow palette. This palette is just so absolutely beautiful. I am so happy that I was able to try this palette this year. I know that he originally launched it last year. I missed out, and when he brought it back this year, I definitely jumped on my chance to own it, and I'm so happy that I did because it's simply so very beautiful. And while I am filming this, it was sold out on Sephora, but I believe it is still available on his website, so if it was a palette you were considering, you might want to go ahead and jump over there if you were looking to purchase this one. And for me personally, I think that it's definitely worth it. It's so beautiful. I love these more like topper shades in this palette. They give you that beautiful, really wet sparkle look to the eyes, which I know was really popular this year. I think toppers in general were really popular this year, like really sparkly, beautiful topper shades, and I think this palette really fit that theme. I wish he'd make it permanent. I would love to see this palette become permanent, and I would love to see more palettes kind of like that are similar to this in the same style, like that would be like sister palettes to this. I would love to see that happen. Now, the next palette I'm going to mention, unfortunately, this palette is currently sold out on both Sephora and the brand's website, which is a shame. I hope they bring this back. This is the Lawless Beauty, the Dreamy Dozen eyeshadow palette. And this palette right here, and now, when you're just looking at it, you would think, oh, it's just, boring. There's just mattes and a few shimmers. It may be, but it's a good kind of boring to me. I think that this is one of those palettes where it's so easy to work with. It's kind of like, I think it might have been Emily Noel here on YouTube that said that this was like the sweatpants of eyeshadow palettes. I'm not sure if that's how she worded it. I feel like that was a perfect description for this palette because the mattes are so easy to work with. They're so easy to build up and to really blend out to create a really beautiful gradient on the eyes if that's what you're looking for. And I just love how they go from like these more lighter tones to these more deeper tones. I really think that's lovely. And then have these 3 shimmer shades that are perfect. 2 of them are more like maybe toppers. I think this is the one I believe that's more, yeah, there's a little more sparkly, a little more chunkiness to that one, but I just feel like it's such a good palette overall. I really wish that Lawless would reconsider this being a limited edition palette. I would love to see this in their permanent line because it's so beautiful, and I think that it would be a staple for so many people in their collection. I love it. Even though I have many palettes that look like this, I love having this palette in my collection. I think that it is such a beautiful palette and definitely one of my favorites from the year. Now, this next one is from ColourPop. We have the ever beautiful 1111 collection. This is such a stunning eyeshadow palette. This is to me one of the most beautiful palettes that ColourPop has put out this year. Now, I will say that another palette I struggled with wanting to include in this roundup was the Rudolph palette from ColourPop, and I still say that's an honorable mention for this video. I'll say that might be the 6th palette I would talk about if I was doing more than 10, but there's something so special about this palette. Yes, it is really similar to the Makeup by Mario and as well as the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. Those are very similar to this one, so I feel like if you have one, you might not want the rest of them, but for me, I love that type of color scheme. I feel like I can never have enough neutrals, and this is such a beautiful palette. Now, it does have one of their new type of, I think just this shade, yeah, a new type of glitter formula. It's not chunky like their other glitters used to be. It's a little bit more smoother, and it's a little easier to work with on the eyes. So I do want to point that out in case you don't want a glitter shade at all. This might not be the palette of your choice, but it's such a beautiful, well-rounded palette. I love how you have like more of like these mid-tone to deeper mattes you can work with, and then of course you have this really beautiful sparkly silvery shade. I think that's really lovely as well. To me, this is ColourPop's palette of the year. For sure. This is such a beautiful palette. I hope that they keep it around forever and ever. I don't think it was limited edition, but they need to keep it permanent. It's so lovely. Now, this next one is definitely one that it was not released this year, but it's one that I tried for the first time this year, and this is the Patrick Ta Major Dimension 2 palette. This is the more rosy version. I fell in love with this palette. Even the creams, and I've never been a fan of cream eyeshadows in palettes, but this palette changed my mind. The formula on this is so beautiful, so easy to work with. The creams are so pigmented. You only need the teeniest tap in your brush in those creams, and they just go really beautifully across the eyes. The first time I used this palette, I did have a slight creasing with the cream shadow, but I mentioned in that video that I had used a little too much. I've been using this palette since that video and used a very small amount and did not experience any creasing, so I did want to point that out in this video too. This is just such a beautiful palette. I definitely want his other two, his first one, the original one, that is definitely more on the just classic neutral, and then he put out the third one that's like all matte. I definitely want both of them because this one is so beautiful. I just have really enjoyed it. I've been really playing with it a lot since I picked it up, and I'm so glad to have it in my collection. I think that really everything I've tried thus far from Patrick Ta, I've really enjoyed, I've really liked, so I definitely want the other two palettes in my collection, and if I had had those, they probably would have been in this video somewhere, or I would have had to include them as honorable mentions, but this is such a lovely one, and if you love rosy neutrals, this is definitely a good palette to check out. And if you have been watching my channel for a while, this next palette should come as an absolute no surprise. The Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. I love and adore this palette so very much. I just feel like this is such a beautiful palette. It was definitely one of my top favorites of this year for sure. I have gotten a ton of use out of it. I feel like I reach for it quite often, especially when I'm not filming or when I'm not doing looks for Instagram. I feel like this is the palette that I definitely gravitate towards. I kind of have to pull myself away from it a little bit because I feel like I'm going to neglect other palettes in my collection for this one, and I want to make sure I'm, rotating properly, but such a beautiful, beautiful palette. I just think that this is just one of the best palettes that she has come out with so far, in my personal opinion. I feel like this palette is probably definitely made its way into the majority of people's end of the year favorites videos. I know it had to be put in mine. I really do love and adore it. I think that it's just so easy to work with. These mattes are really beautiful. With all these palettes I'm mentioning, there's no fading, no creasing, no muddying, nothing like that. They're all really beautiful formulas, and I just think there's something special about this palette. She has beautiful palettes. I've loved every single one I've ever tried, but there's something more special about this one for me personally, so this is definitely one that I had to include in this video. And the look I'm wearing today in this video, I used 3 of the shades from this palette. I'm using the shade Stone, Whisper, and Fair. I just played a palette bingo. I pulled 3 shades from this palette, and then I pulled 3 shades from a more colorful palette that I will talk about in just a second. So if you were curious about what's on my eyes, this is one of the palettes, and I'll talk about that other one next when we talk about the colorful palettes. Okay, we're going to move on to the colorful palettes, and it's really interesting that all 5 of the colorful palettes I'm picking out are from indie brands. This year was the first time that I tried many of these brands, actually all of these brands. This was the first time I'd tried any of them, and I am so glad that this year I branched out and tried more indie brands. Me being on Instagram and also following new creators here on YouTube has really shared the world of indie brands with me, because they can do colorful makeup. They can do really beautiful sparkly duochrome, multichrome, holochrome, any kind of shifty shades that you want, they have it, and I'm so happy that I've been trying some new brands to me. But the first one that I want to talk about is the Divina Cosmetics, the beautiful Fantasia palette. Yes, I am biased. It's a unicorn, and I love unicorns very clearly. They're so beautiful. So I knew I had to have this palette. But regardless of the absolute beautiful outside, the inside is just as beautiful. These matte shades are so easy to work with. So are these beautiful, gorgeous shimmer shades. They have some really beautiful shifts to them. Just so absolutely stunning. Every time I've used this palette, I have loved it even more and more. I'm always impressed whenever I use it. Just so easy to blend out, so easy just to work with. Absolutely stunning. And the other three shades that I'm wearing in today's look come from this palette. I am wearing the shades Astria, Lucius, and Frostbane. Those were the three that it picked out for me. And Frostbane is what you're seeing right here in this more inner corner. I just loved adding that pop of that little beautiful duochrome right there in the inner corner. I think it added so much since the look turned out more on the neutral side overall. I loved adding that little pop of sparkle. But this is so lovely, so beautiful. And I do have more from Divina coming this way. I cannot wait to try some more from them in the new year. I'm so excited. But definitely, this is such a beautiful palette. I would recommend this palette to anyone. The next palette I'm going to talk about is from Unearthly Cosmetics. This is their collab with Heather Alston, the Resurgence eyeshadow palette. And I love this palette. This is so unique to my collection. I mean, just how absolutely stunning these shades are. I don't have another palette like this. I mean, I just feel like this really added something to my collection. I mean, so did the Divina palette too, because I don't have a lot of palettes that have duochromes, multichromes, or anything like that. I don't have a lot of that because let's be honest, mainstream brands just don't really do that, which they should. But I just feel like this is such a beautiful palette. I have used it so much. I've loved every look I've ever created with it. There again, it's so easy to work with. These mattes, these absolutely gorgeous shimmer shades in this palette are so beautiful. And I've loved every look that I've seen Heather create with it as well. And she'll even mix like some of the matte shades like to change the tones a little bit or make a really beautiful color, like a separate color. And I think that is so beautiful. I feel like that's such a creative way to use your eyeshadow palettes. Just kind of mix and match, make your own color using a palette. And I really love this. This was my first time trying Unearthly Cosmetics. I was really impressed by the formula. This one definitely had to be in my top 5 of the colorful palettes because it's just so pretty. It is still available while I'm filming this, so if you were interested in this palette, it is still available. I know that you can buy the palette separate or you can buy the full collection, but such a lovely palette. I would definitely recommend it to anyone. And the next one is another collab with Heather Alston. I have discovered Heather's channel this year for the first time and really fell in love with her channel. She does really beautiful, colorful looks, which is really inspiring since I usually do more neutral. But this is her palette with Adept Cosmetics. And this is just such a stunning palette. It's really beautiful, and I love how you do have some tones in here where you could create like a more neutral look if you wanted to, but then you have these really beautiful shimmer shades in this palette. It is very shimmer heavy, so if you love a lot of shimmer, if you love a lot of like beautiful sparkly shades and then some really pretty shifty shades as well, like you have this shade right here and this shade, well, they all have just such a beautiful shift to them. I know that this was the one they've re-released, I think, and they changed the formula, I believe, or they've updated the packaging. I'm not exactly sure. I know Heather explained it in one of her videos when she talked about they were going to bring this palette back, but I definitely picked it up during their, I believe it was their Black Friday sale, and I'm so happy that I have it in my collection. It's such a stunning palette. Absolutely really beautiful, and I think that even if you weren't looking to use the mattes for any particular day, these shimmer shades will just add something so beautiful to your look. If you just threw in a bronzer in your crease or all over your lid and then topped with one of these shimmer shades, that would be a stunning look all on its own. Just a beautiful palette, and this was my first time trying Adept Cosmetics. A beautiful formula, and Adept has really beautiful palettes. I know they just recently launched one that's like, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but it's like alien themed. That is a beautiful palette. That's so beautiful. It's one I've been actually considering, but I haven't picked it up, but it might be on like pre-order right now, but so lovely. I think that this company has some really beautiful eyeshadow palettes and really unique palettes too. Like I know they have some of those shades where they have like 3 different colors in one pan. I think that's really stunning. So I would definitely tell anybody, if you haven't tried Adept Cosmetics and you were looking to, this is a really beautiful place to start. And this next one is from Odin's Eye. This is their Hey Reindeer eyeshadow palette. And of course, I love deer very much. They are my favorite animal of all time. And they are my namesake here, dearly. But this color scheme It's so pretty. And I love how this is like a Christmas themed palette, but it's so different. Like, I love how we have this pop of orange in this palette. I just love how they've added that. Like, you have these really beautiful, more wintry inspired looks, but then you do have the shades like this right here and the golds and stuff in the palette that are more maybe the traditional Christmas. But I love that there are some pops of other shades that make it more unique. This is kind of like the Unearthly palette in the sense that this added something to my collection. It's very different from what I already have, and I really love it for being so unique, and it's so easy to work with. The eyeshadows perform really beautifully. The shimmer shades do as well. I really wish now that I had picked up the other 3 Christmas palettes, but I don't even know if they're still available now, but I kind of wish that I had picked up those as well, because this was so lovely, and I'm so glad that I got to try this brand. I know I see a lot of people who really love this brand over on Instagram, and they always create such beautiful looks with the palettes, and I'm so glad that I got a chance to try one of their palettes this year. But when I saw the reindeer palette, I knew that was definitely the one I had to have. But it's so lovely, so beautiful, and definitely deserved to be in my top 5 colorful palettes. And last but certainly not least is the gorgeous Blend Bunny Machina palette. This has 24 shades in it, and is so stunning. It's so beautiful. I just love the variety of shades that you get in this palette, and they're so easy to work with. They're so pigmented, but what I love, because they are so easy to work with, so easy to blend, that you can really pack a punch with these eyeshadows, or you can really soften them to create really soft pastel looks, and I did do that a lot in the video where I tested this palette out. I have videos, I believe, of all these palettes on my channel, so I will try to link some of them in the description box or up here in the little eye icon. I think you can only list 5 videos in that, I'm not sure, but I'll try to list some of the links somewhere where you can check out if you're wanting to see full reviews on any of these eyeshadow palettes. I believe I have full reviews on all of them on my channel. But this palette is just so beautiful. This was my first time trying Blend Bunny. I am very late to the game on that. I know a lot of people love Blend Bunny, and I can definitely see why. This is such a beautiful palette, and I know it has such a sentimental story behind it with the creator and her father. That was such a beautiful and sad story to read. But if you want to read more about the story behind this palette, you can read that over on the Blend Bunny Cosmetics Instagram page. It's such a really sweet and sad story. And this palette, I don't know what it was about this palette, but it really drew me in. I think all of her palettes are absolutely beautiful. But when she announced this one, I knew I had to have it. I just knew. And I do absolutely love the artwork on the outside. I think she's so beautiful with that little butterfly on her nose. So stunning. Just a beautiful palette overall, and I knew that I definitely had to include it in my top 5 colorful palettes of the year. But there you have all 10 palettes, my top 10 palettes of the year. 5 neutral, 5 colorful. All of these palettes are so, so beautiful, so worth it. If you were looking at any of them and they are still available, I know only at least one of them is no longer available at this time that I'm filming this, but I hope they bring it back. But these palettes are just, they're stunning. They're so easy to work with. They're just lovely. The formulas are amazing. I would definitely tell anybody these 10 are so beautiful. Definitely check them out if you haven't already and you were looking to purchase any new eyeshadow palettes. Now, if someone asked me, you must pick a top palette in both the neutral and the colorful, well then I would definitely say my top neutral would be the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude. That's such a lovely palette. And in my top colorful, it would definitely be the Divina Fantasia palette. I think both of those palettes are so beautiful, and doing this look with them today, I really want to do more combos with both of them because I really love the look that it created. There's something about those 2 palettes. They're very special. I love both of them. I love every single palette I've mentioned here. You could not go wrong with any of these palettes. They are all so very beautiful, and the formulas are all incredible on each of them. But I do hope that you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, I hope you will please consider leaving a like, a comment, or subscribing if you haven't already. And please make sure to follow me over on Instagram at Jessica Dearly, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!